The weft and weave of fate guides. How did that poem go again?
So, Kindred's Q is actually the dumbest thing ever. The way it works has been so bizarre to me in the past that I've even had a YouTube video documenting how seemingly inconsistent it is. But now that I've realized we've had this new fandangled practice tool thing, I decided to get right to work on figuring out what makes this crappy ability tick. Alright, so first with the really simple stuff. Your dash time is always the same regardless of how far you travel. This means you can't shorten the animation at all, and means you should only use this for repositioning in the late game, as you're better off auto-attacking if you just want the maximum DPS. There's one sort of exception though. If you recast this ability exactly on top of your current position, or right against terrain, the ability will immediately animation cancel, and you will both fire arrows and auto-attack reset instantly. However, this first edge case is nearly impossible to practically achieve in normal play, and this second edge case is actually a lot harder than it seems, so this animation resetting is pretty much impractical. The next thing worth mentioning is that the range at which you will fire arrows from Dance of Arrows is actually slightly larger than your auto attack range. It's about 50 extra units, if I'm not mistaken. This is likely due to the fact that range targeting for abilities is model based, whereas range targeting for basic attacks is center based. This is the only thing that's arguably good about Dance of Arrows, and I'll eventually make the case that it actually sometimes makes it worse. Alright, now for some of the really weird stuff. If you spawn two training dummies that are on opposite sides of each other, but are still at the end of Kindred's auto attack range, you will only fire an arrow at one target, the target that she most recently attacked.
Embracing life means accepting death.
If you arrange the training dummies in a T-shape, then Kindred will only attack all three dummies if she attacks the middle one. After some experimentation with this, my initial conclusion was that the targeting was cone-based. She would first lock onto a primary target, and then choose side bolt targets based off an extremely wide cone centered at the primary target, with a blind spot behind her, so that you don't hit targets behind you. However, that's not the case, and things get even weirder. If the two training dummies are on opposite sides, but they're sufficiently close together, Kindred will still fire arrows at both of them. It appears as though the blind spot will only trigger if the training dummy is on the opposite side, and they're pretty far away. Further tests reveal that the targeting for the side bolts are actually based off how close the side targets are to the main target. This nearest target principle also seems to apply if the dummies are lined up in a row.
Flee or stand firm.
Doesn't matter.
Testing this against minions and dummies seems to verify all the things I've noted thus far. It seems like if Kindred does not have an auto attack target prior to casting Q, she will primarily lock onto the nearest champion, and then if not, she'll try to lock onto the nearest minion. The sidebolt targeting does not have any prioritization whatsoever, so even if there are nearby champions, the sidebolt will still ignore them and only go for the closest target to the main one.
They break too easy.
Alright, so what does this all mean? Well, in a situation where you're fishing for an enemy to be out of position, so you can engage him with a quick dash, you won't hit your desired target from neutral if there are other nearby targets, which really sucks, especially if you were auto-attacking a different target beforehand.
And dance.
Furthermore, let's say you're in a situation where your opponents are running in semi-split directions, and you want to auto one target, auto the other target, and then jump towards the first target to finish him off with your Q right as it comes off cooldown, so you can maximize your DPS while securing a kill. That actually won't work the way you want it to, because the targeting for your Q will now lock onto the second player, and your bolts will very likely not fire arrows towards your initial target. Even if you right-click the intended target while you leap, she will not autocorrect the Q targeting for you. On top of this, the fact that the bolt range on the Q is further than Kindred's basic attack makes it even more likely that the bolts won't hit their intended target. Now that we've gone over all this, let's answer the bigger question. Why does this happen? So, programming-wise, the explanation I can think of for how this ability works is as follows. First, Kindred attempts to dash. Secondly, when Kindred's dash ends, a primary target is designated for her Q's bolts in the following order of prioritization. First, is the enemy that Kindred most recently attacked. Second, is the nearest enemy champion. And after that, it's the nearest enemy minion or monster. I didn't actually test this, but I'm assuming monsters are probably prioritized before minions. And then thirdly, from the primary target, an AoE scan occurs that searches for the targets that are both closest to the main target and within Kindred's cast range. These targets determine where Kindred's sidebolts go. Alright, so those of you who actually give a shit are probably wondering, what the fuck, has anyone actually implemented an ability like this before? And the answer is actually yes. Does anybody remember Wukong's Nimbus Strike? He dashes towards a selected target, and then two clones of him will also dash to and attack two nearby targets. This works exactly the same way as a Kindred's Q does, but the difference is the primary selection is hard targeted, and the sidebolt selection AoE is much smaller. His nearby unit targeting even shares the same issue that the sidebolts does, which is that they never prioritize champions, and only aim exclusively at the nearest target. The reason this issue doesn't affect Wukong negatively though, is because for him, the dash and the damage portion of Nimbus Strike are both targeted. Therefore, if there's a target that Wukong really wants to hit, he can just always directly select that target to dash to them. But Kindred doesn't always have the ability or luxury to do this because her dash and her bolt attacks are separate features. And yet, in spite of this major fundamental difference, I'm willing to bet money on the fact that Riot has just recycled this old implementation and expect it to function perfectly without any quality of life problems.
Improve your skills, then find me again.
Understanding how this ability works has also made me realize why her Q bugs out the way it does in the video I demonstrated. If you watch in this clip where I complain like crazy, Kindred is leaping facing the opposite direction. This can only mean she has pre-selected the already dead Gromp target as her primary target, which is a huge gameplay bug, and as a result fails to fire any arrows at the blue buff because the Gromp is too far away from it. So yeah, Riot, please stop being lazy and make your abilities work intuitively like they should.
Executed.